So once again, at this point in working on my pear, I'm going to primarily be using my yellow and my white to get this sort of green midtone into that highlight area, because there is definitely a little bit of extra warmth, basically just some yellow in there right before we get to that brightest white. So I'm not really changing the value of anything at this point, mostly just kind of changing the intensity of it by brightening it up by adding in a little bit of yellow. And you will notice, looking at this particular pear, there are very specific areas where it is warmer versus others, such as right here where this reflected light is a very warm part of the pear. So I am going to be using more yellow and pressing down harder with my yellow. Whereas up here is a very cool shadow, so there's no yellow. Down here there is some, but there's more right here. So you want to make sure that you are looking at your reference image constantly, paying attention to the exact color, the tone of that color, the temperature of that color, and trying to match what you see as best you can by layering up different colors. So now I am going to go ahead and go in with some white, and looking at my highlight, this edge, the left edge of the highlight, is much sharper than the right edge. The right edge is more of a gradual transition, which is why I have more of my yellow and my green kind of extending into this side. And then the right hand side here is more of a sharp sort of cutoff, which is again why I've got more of the darker color right next to the white, and then it kind of stops. And then there's that one spot in the middle of the highlight where I do have a little bit of that golden green. So as you can see, the white does not make a big difference in terms of brightness of the highlight. What it does is help smooth out that section right before the highlight. It kind of acts almost like a blending tool. And then up here where I have that cooler highlight, I'm just going to go directly in with some of the white. I could put a little bit of blue in here as well, and I very well might do that because that will cool down that highlight a little bit more. And then my reflected light, I will put some white, especially up here towards the top of it. But then those would be the only places I would use white in this particular pear. So my next step at this point is to go back in with any reds or greens to sort of darken up some of those shadow spaces a little bit more. So I'm just going to put a little more red here where this shadow is. I could use purple and I could use blue. It really just depends on whether it's a warm or a cool shadow. I am going to take a little bit of blue, because the shadow does seem to get a little cooler as it moves up. So I'm going to put just a little bit of blue in there also. And remember, I will be going back over this with green. But I still want to make sure that I am fading any color that I use on top into the colors that are around it. Going to put a little bit of blue up here as well. Maybe a little bit of brown, kind of like the stem is brown, so it's kind of reflecting a little bit on this part of the pear. So put a little bit of blue there, but then also go in with some brown to show where the stem reflects a little bit. Then I'm going to go back in with my darker green again over top of the red to once again neutralize it and turn it into a muddier green rather than a red there. Still paying attention to my reference image more than my actual drawing itself. Still making sure that I fade each color into the next. Go back over with that golden green, because now that is starting to look more like the shadow that I actually see on that part of the pear. And that's also a really good example of how not every layer covers over the whole object. A lot of times, especially as you build up those layers, you will find that the later and later and later layers basically end up getting smaller and smaller because they are more focused and more specific to certain areas. So it's perfectly okay if each layer that you add uses or covers less and less of the surface. I'm going to bring this down a little bit more. And I do notice that there is a little bit of yellow on the outer edge here. So I'm going to go in with some yellow right there along that outer edge. And then it does transition up into white as I get towards this highlight at the top. So I am going to go ahead and go over that with some white as well. There's a little spot of red here, which actually still is red on the pear. So I'm not going to be going over that with green. I'm going to leave that red sort of showing there. But I am still going to fade it into the colors in the areas around it. And this color needs to be just a little bit darker. But I'm not going to go over that red section because I do want it to still stay a little bit red there. But then this part of my pear needs to all be just a little darker, because this and this right now are a bit too close to the same value. When I squint and look at my reference image, this is definitely lighter than this part. So I'm just going to darken this whole section a little bit with my golden green. Once again, still protecting that reflected light up here and still transitioning as smoothly as I can into the next values. Turn the paper as needed, turn the pencil as needed, move your hands, stand up. Once again, I want you all to focus really hard on trying to get your value transitions accurate, but also figure out what works for you. Not everybody draws or shades in the same way, and that's perfectly fine. I would rather you guys not necessarily just copy me. I want you to use the techniques that I am showing, learn from them, and then figure out how to adopt them and make them your own to help you represent what you want to draw as best you can. So I'm almost done darkening this section. So then my next step is going to be to do the stem and the leaf of the pear. And both of them are going to happen very similarly to the way that I've done the body of the pear. It would just be slightly different colors. This would be more of a darker green with maybe a little bit more blue. So that this is definitely a warmer green, and then the leaves are a cooler green. and then the stem is mostly brown with a little bit of red in it. And then the next step I would be doing would be to figure out what I want to do on the background. And I could leave the background white, or I could use a complementary color to my pear, which would then make the pear stand out. So I could do a red or a reddish orange, since there's going to be some blue in the leaves, and most likely that is what I will do. And then I would sort of use similar colors on the bottom portion where I am doing the collage part.